asked me to provide this lengthy bio, which I always provide all my accomplishments and how great I am. And then I always thank the introducer for reading it exactly as my mother wrote it. But Cassie's was so short, now I can say, thank you for reading it as my mother-in-law would have written it. So I have no slides. I guess I'm going to be doing my interpretive dance. Well, it is a pleasure to be here, to come from the Deep South in Southern California to be with you all tonight. I've never knew about ions in this context. I spend a lot of time with ions of other varieties in the physics laboratories that I work with. I want to share a few slides which I've been thinking about for the past few hours and how they connect to the kind of the mission and the wonderful co-speakers that are going to be presenting tonight. And where do I fit in? And I think the thing that I can most, really speak to in this attempt to bring consilience between spirituality, in my case, it's a Judeo-Christian variety, and science, and the question of can they be reconciled? And I think that they can. And I have to say, Cassie, it's a little depressing to think about Edgar, who is such a wonderful person and an amazing, scientist, engineer, and astronaut, a real hero to me. But if you have to go 250,000 miles away from Earth to get the perspective that he had, we're all in trouble because, between me and Edgar, we went to the moon exactly half the time each. So there's really, we want to get the cosmic perspective, but we want to get it while we're on Earth, at least until, down the road from here, or where I live, Elon Musk gets space travel so competitive that we can all go. But my slides are entitled Ashes to Ashes, Dust to Dust. As I said, I practice Judaism, Judeo-Christian tradition, not the maybe more noetically inspired or spiritual pursuits that some of you may pursue. And in Genesis, that book of non-scientific rationale according to some people, it does concern the biggest topic, right? So why does the Bible begin with the Big Bang? You ever thought about that? I mean, those of you who are Jewish, and at least go to synagogue, twice a year maybe, during Shark Week, I don't know when, but when you go, you might have heard that, and you might have heard this phrase, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Now, I don't care if you believe this tradition is true or not, because I think there's a great deal of wisdom. And I always point out that science, the word science in Greek means knowledge. It doesn't mean wisdom. So where do you go to get your wisdom? If you say you go to the books of Stephen Hawking or Carl Sagan, well, that's one approach. But why overlook the ancient traditions of the past? So in my case, it's Judaism. Reading the passage from Genesis, I think it's 3:19. It says, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Now, and you'll hear a lot about dust. Dust is kind of the villain in my book, Losing the Nobel Prize. We were looking for the element that actually makes up, so Edgar was wrong again, as much as it pains me to say, we are not only made of star stuff, we are made of hydrogen. There's a tremendous amount of hydrogen in our bodies that was not made in stars. It was made in the Big Bang. It was created in the genesis of the entire universe itself, not merely in the explosion of a failed star that blew up about 5 billion years ago or more in our local part of the galaxy. So doesn't that make you feel even more significant, in a sense, that you're not only a single star, I'll show you a lot of stars, but you're actually made of the stuff of the Big Bang itself. So in this Genesis passage, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, it made me realize the word Adam, which Cassie helpfully showed, picture of Adam and Eve. Adam in Hebrew means earth or dirt. And so God allegedly made the first man from dirt that he scraped off the earth. And so he was dust, he was dirt. And some people might consider most men to be dirt. But anyway, we're not going to go there. Instead, we're just going to say that from dust we came, and what is our ultimate end? Dust. We're going to decay. All of us in here will be dead, be gone, will be evaporated and become part pulverized. Pulvis means dust. And will be part of the cosmos again. So what does that mean? We only have two moments in life. They're both separated by periods of dust. When we began and when we end. I think it's a magical thing to think about, and it's sort of, maybe not the classic thing that I talk about. I'm going to talk a little bit about my book, but really the essence of what we study is often the most intriguing things you could possibly study, the origin of the universe. Here's the Hubble Extreme Ultra Deep Field. This is looking out at what's been called the cosmic wallpaper. So if you happen to have a Hubble telescope and you look out, and you point your telescope out, you'll see all these patches of light. And almost every single one of these patches is a galaxy, not just a star. There's only 1 or 2 stars here. So NASA took this, pointed the Hubble telescope in a blank region for weeks and weeks at a time, and exposed this image. And in it, it revealed the background of all things. And there might be some galaxy where there are some people and noetic societies looking out at us. And it gives you a cosmic perspective. Because it may look big to you, this image looks big, right? But actually it only subtends the same amount of area as this laser pointer does on the wall, which now you can't see. Laser pointer. It's running out of energy. Is there an energetic healer in the house? So a laser pointer can produce a spot covering all these galaxies, about 4,000 galaxies in this image. Now, that's a huge number, and each one has 100 billion stars or maybe more, and each of those might have 100 planets or minor planets. And then if you ask, well, how many patches of this size are there in the universe? Well, all you have to do is completely cover this entire room with laser pointer spots. Multiply by 4,000, multiply by 100 billion, multiply by 100. So I've got 10 minutes, so we can do that. You get a number that's about 10 to the 22nd. Well, 22 zeros following it. That's how many possible places where life could exist on planets throughout the observable universe. And my research converges on the fact that there may be other universes in what's called the multiverse. And why not? There are other planets, there are other stars, there are other galaxies. Why not other universes? The ultimate expression of Copernicanism. And that's an open question. We don't know the answer to that question. Now, the life cycle that does bring stardust down to Earth, literally making the planet on which we stand, is a process illustrated here. It's the evolution of what's called a type 2 supernova, a star that gets so big and massive that eventually it can no longer be sustained by radioactive pressure, radiative pressure, that comes from the fusion of elements within it. And that happens when the star starts to produce iron. And that same iron, later, when the star erupts, as shown here, that will form, say, the rocky core, the iron core of our planet. It will also produce meteorites, like I brought here with me tonight. And it will produce the hemoglobin molecules, iron molecule, that flows through your veins. So it is true. Of course, it is not only true that we're made of star stuff. We're made of many, many other things. And this process is a miraculous ballet that takes place over billions of years. And we'll hear later from Bruce and others, perhaps, about the process that takes this Big Bang from the origin of the universe, from nothing, perhaps, into something, then into non-life, and these rocks into life. From, as I say, rocks to Rachmaninoff. Or, like, from bacteria to Bach. From trying to outdo the cart before the horse. I mean, she set a low bar here. Okay. Now, famously, Carl Sagan turned the Voyager spacecraft around on Valentine's Day 1990 and took this iconic picture. It's called The Pale Blue Dot, and he wrote a little poem about it, so to speak, which later turned into a book. He said, "We succeeded in taking the picture, and if you look at it, you see a dot." So this was high technology in 1990, okay? Now we'd have Instagram, there'd be 3D renderings of this, but it was just a single pixel. In fact, you can't even see the moon at the resolution of camera technology of the 80s and 70s when Voyager was launched. It's beyond the orbit of Saturn. And he said there's the entire dot covers the Earth. And every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a dot, on a speck of dust, a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. And so if you look at it from that perspective, you might think you're quite insignificant. And at alternate times, scientists like to think of themselves, they do stuff like we're doing in Chile and at the South Pole where the losing the Nobel Prize saga takes place. We're trying to go back in time using telescopes that act as time machines. So none of my paleontologist friends have access to one of these, but they would kill for it, right? It's the fact that light travels in a finite speed in a finite time, about 1 foot per nanosecond. So if you're 1 foot farther back, a row farther back, I see you, you look 1 nanosecond older, you look beautiful. And a lot of people start moving to the back. We're trying to build telescopes now, and here's an aerial view of the Simons Observatory project, which I'm really quite honored to be the director of. This is coming together in the next few years. Cassie mentioned some of its details. We're trying to do a survey of most of the observable universe over most of cosmic history, 13.799 billion years in the past, hoping to look for, not as the universe is now, but what it was like a trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second after the Big Bang. A period is called inflation. And there's a concomitant theory called the multiverse that I mentioned before that says if inflation took place, there's a very high likelihood our universe is not the only universe. And it's extremely exciting as I get into in the book. So as Edgar said and Joni Mitchell said, we are stardust, we are golden. I love this picture because it shows 3 different types of dust. It shows the stardust in the Milky Way galaxy. It shows 2 figures, 2 humans with iron flowing through their veins, which once was in a type 2 supernova. And it shows this rocky structure somewhere in Arizona. And just recently I returned from an eclipse, a total solar eclipse in which the moon, a giant ball of dust in its own right, first visited 50 years ago Saturday night. And they witnessed this. These people, I brought eclipse glasses for the indigenous people that live there. And they talked to me about their creation myth. And it struck me as very similar, except for one feature. Whereas we look at constellations and astrologically, we note the bright points of light, the stars. They look at the Milky Way galaxy and they see clouds of dust. And to them, the dust is beautiful. The dust is their constellation. They name their constellations after creatures that they would see that are full of life. So back then, when you would go to an ancient Incan bar, you would ask, what's your sign? And someone would say, I'm an umbilicus of the llama. What are you? I'm a toad. Okay, well, that was obvious. This is what you would see. So dust is life to other cultures, and it's cool to have that cosmic perspective. So I say to the stars, not just through hardship, but through dust. We see the universe through a dusty window. And dust, as I say, is a spoiler that creates planets and sometimes destroys Nobel Prizes. So I want to finish with a quote that I think really summarizes my feelings about dust, and it's from Mahatma Gandhi, nominated the same number of times as Adolf Hitler for the Nobel Peace Prize, true story. And he said, and they never won it, neither one won it, and he said, the seeker after truth should be humbler than the dust. So the world tramples dust under its feet, but someone who's humble, this true seeker after truth, should so humble himself or herself that the dust could crush him. And then, and only then, will he have a glimpse into truth. And I think it's a brilliant way to look at it. We're both the most majestic in some sense, the culmination of cosmic creation. We know no other species that exists that has consciousness in the way that we do in technology throughout the observable universe so far. That may change in, later on tonight. But for now, we should have this humility that we are great, but we can also be insignificant, a speck of dust floating on a cosmic sunbeam. So I invite you to engage, and I recommend strongly my book. Okay, what am I going to say? I hope you like it, and if you come up afterwards and you buy a copy, I will give you a piece of genuine space dust, a 4.5 billion year old piece of meteorite from the early solar system. Thank you guys so much.